But I'd like to say something about Max Roach in relationship to the tradition of drumming, which for me it's been very important. One of the things I think he said was that he was not a drummer, but he was a musician. He was not a musician, but he was an artist. And perhaps he said also this last thing, but if he didn't say it, I'm saying it. He said, I'm not an artist, I'm a human being. And being a human being surpasses all the other stuff. You know, unless you're a human being, you can't be an artist or a drummer or a saxophonist or a poet or a dancer, whatever it might be, correct? Okay. So one of the things that was very important about Max Roach to me in my life was that I feel that he helped to elevate the position of drumming, especially in the West, to a whole nother level. And he wasn't the first, but he was one of the first people who played drums to lead their own groups. He was a composer. He was a social and political spokesperson. And in his own way, he was a human rights activist. So he was a pretty complete person. Hopefully, if some of us or any of us aren't there yet to that place, hopefully we all will get to that place. I had a chance to briefly meet him one time, and I was struck with absolute fear and terror because I was doing a festival in Chicago called the Asian American Jazz Festival. Max Roach was there with the group he was playing with at the time called the Beijing Trio. And his group had played, and then I was playing with Fred Anderson, great tenor saxophone player who came from Chicago, and a sax player from San Francisco named Francis Wong. So we were playing, and I turned and looked across my left shoulder. There were curtains behind us, and the curtain was cracked open, and there was Max Roach standing behind me, looking at me play, you know. So I froze, but something inside of me allowed me to keep playing. And then the next day, Fred Anderson told me that Max Roach was asking about me. So as a young drummer, I think just Max Roach asking about me was probably one of the highest compliments and encouraging things I could have heard at the time. So very happy that Basilio and his whole staff have decided to dedicate this particular edition of the festival here in Sant'Anna Arresi to Max Roach, because he was a very important person in not only American culture coming from the United States, but I feel throughout the world. And so in saying all of that, I'm saying all of that just to say that this next piece, because of all of these qualities and stuff that he had, we felt that it was important to do maybe a little bit of something that he created, you know, and I'm pretty sure he'd be pleased if, you know, us doing it with this instrument also. And but I want to say something about Ali Keita also, because he's a very humble person. He comes from a tradition that's called the griot tradition, you know, the griot tradition in West Africa. And he comes from a family of griots. Keita is one of the griot names. And to be a griot is not an easy thing, you know. I mean, you have to go through extensive training and study. You have to become basically a scholar in oral history. And oral history is something that those of us coming from the West, meaning the United States and Europe, we're losing, you know. But he comes from a tradition of people that have maintained the oral history. I mean, he can play and recite oral history going back hundreds and hundreds, maybe 1,000 years or so. And growing up as a griot, It means that you go through this really sort of, I don't want to call it torturous training, but it's a type of training that if you come up in a griot family, you have to go through that training. And you have to, you know, it's like being in the Shaolin monastery, you know, learning Kung Fu or something like that, you know. And so I know he didn't mention that. He talked about his father and his grandfather, but it's going back further than that. So within his culture, he's a very, very important person, you know, and I think it's a privilege for people in the West, for us to be around people like him, you know, because perhaps he can inspire us to regenerate something that we have maybe lost a little bit in our culture, you know, and so, yeah, that's that. Thank you.